The Valkyrie was dying, not in silence, not in grace, but in a scream of metal and fire that echoed across the void above Aurelius's shattered moon. The ship's hull was torn open in half a dozen places, venting oxygen in violent plumes that glittered against the stars. Decks collapsed like falling dominoes, fire swallowing bulkheads, alarms wailing louder than any siren Marcus Hale had ever heard. He staggered down a corridor, suit cracked along the arm, helmet filters struggling to keep the smoke at bay. Plasma fire had chewed through the walls, leaving jagged edges glowing orange. Behind him lay the bodies of his squad, people he'd led through training, through battles, through laughter in the mess halls. Now nothing but twisted armor and blood frozen in zero gravity. He couldn't stop. He couldn't even look back. The Zirathi were here. Marcus had faced them before. Sleek predators. Insectoid armor fused with living tissue, faces hidden behind jagged helmets that pulsed faintly with green light. They fought with precision and cruelty, every shot placed to kill, never wound. The Valkyrie had been one of Earth's strongest carriers, but to the Zirathi, it had been just another target. He sprinted through a collapsing junction, boots skidding on broken metal. Explosions rippled through the spine of the ship, throwing him against the wall. Pain lanced up his side, but he pushed through it. His blaster was low on charge, and the power pack was half melted, but it was all he had left. That was when he heard it. At first, he thought it was the groan of ruptured hull plates. But no, the sound was too soft, too alive. A cry, faint but sharp, carrying fear and desperation. Not a voice he recognized. Not human. Marcus froze, heartbeat thundering. He should have ignored it. Orders were clear. Fight until the last man, deny the enemy everything, die before capture. But something primal in him wouldn't let him walk away. He forced his legs to move, following the sound down a side corridor lit only by sparking wires. The cry came from a twisted airlock where an escape pod had crashed halfway through the deck. The pod's outer shell was scorched black, its hatch warped from impact. Smoke bled from its seams, filling the narrow passage with a bitter taste of burned circuitry. Marcus holstered his blaster and tore at the hatch with gloved hands. The metal resisted, groaning in protest. Until finally, with one last pull, it ripped open. Inside, curled among fragments of shattered glass and torn restraints, lay a girl. She was alien, there was no mistaking that. Her skin shimmered faintly silver under the failing lights, smooth and unscarred despite the wreck. Her hair was pale, almost white, tangled around her face. And her eyes, those stopped Marcus in his tracks. Gold, molten, burning with a strange inner light that pierced through the smoke. Her body trembled, breaths shallow, as if she'd been running for far longer than he could imagine. She wasn't in armor. She wasn't a soldier. Her clothes looked ceremonial, layered silk-like fabric torn by the crash, marked by strange sigils that meant nothing to him. When she saw him, her lips moved, and a fragile voice spilled out in broken Terran. "Please, help. They hunt me." Marcus hesitated. Humanity was in its last stand. Entire colonies had already fallen to the Zirathi. Saving her meant slowing down, risking capture. He didn't know who she was, why she was here, or why the enemy would want her dead. But none of it mattered in that second. He saw terror in her eyes, the same terror he had seen on Earth's burning colonies, and he knew he couldn't leave her. He reached in, scooped her up with one arm, and swung her over his shoulder. She weighed less than he expected, as if gravity had less claim on her body. She clung to his armor with shaking fingers, whispering words he didn't understand, a language filled with sharp syllables and soft undertones. Blaster fire echoed down the hall, Zirathi soldiers cutting through the wreck, voices clicking like knives on stone. Marcus didn't think. He ran. The corridor shook as another section of the ship gave way, flames pouring in behind him. Sparks showered from above and bulkheads slammed shut in emergency lockdowns. He sprinted through them before they sealed, the alien girl clutching his chest plate. Each breath was a battle. His vision blurred from smoke and blood loss. His boots pounded against the broken floor as shadows closed in behind him, the sound of armored feet growing closer. Still, he pushed forward. Through fire, through smoke, through death. He didn't know why he cared. didn't know why he carried her instead of finding a gun nest and making his last stand. All he knew was this: he was a soldier of Earth, and someone had called for help. That was reason enough. When he finally burst into the hangar bay, half-destroyed starfighters burned like dying suns. He searched desperately for anything that could fly, anything that could get them off this corpse of a ship. But before his eyes fell on the battered dropship in the corner, before the enemy poured into the bay in a tide of green fire, one truth carved itself into Marcus's soul. He hadn't just rescued a girl, he had just pulled fate itself from the flames. The girl's whisper still echoed in his helmet when the air behind him erupted in gunfire. The Zirathi were inside the hangar. Their weapons spat burning green bolts, each one hissing through the smoke as Marcus sprinted across the floor, carrying the alien on his shoulder. The hangar looked like a graveyard. Fighters lay in twisted heaps, wings bent, cockpits shattered. Fires crackled where fuel lines had burst. The entire bay was tilted from the damage, wreckage sliding toward the gaping hole that opened onto space. Marcus's eyes locked on the dropship shoved half sideways against the wall. Its paint was scorched, the hull dented, but its thrusters looked intact. It wasn't made for combat, but it could fly, and that was enough. He dropped into a crouch, squeezing off a shot with his half-dead blaster. The bolt slammed into a Zirathi soldier's chest, flaring green sparks as it fell twitching to the floor. Another leapt over the wreckage, hissing, blade-like weapon raised, but Marcus kicked a broken crate into its legs and blasted it in the head before it could rise. "Keep your head down," he barked to the girl. She pressed against him, silent now, her wide golden eyes darting over the chaos. The rest of the squad poured in. Plasma fire lit up the bay like lightning, chewing through steel and air. Marcus ran flat out, weaving through wreckage, shoving aside twisted metal. His lungs burned, his ribs screamed, but adrenaline drowned it all. At the dropship, he slammed his hand onto the hatch control. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then with a shudder, the doors groaned open. He shoved the girl inside and dove after her just as another barrage of plasma struck the wall where he'd stood. The cockpit smelled of dust and burned wires. Panels flickered uncertainly. Marcus strapped her into the co-pilot's seat, then threw himself into the pilot's chair. Fingers moved on instinct, flipping switches, jamming power cells into place. The engines coughed once, then roared alive. Outside, the Zirathi realized what was happening. Their voices rose into furious clicks as they charged, weapons blazing. The first volley slammed into the dropship's hull, rattling it like a drum. Warnings screamed across the console. "Not today," Marcus growled. He slammed the throttle forward. The dropship shot across the bay, scattering debris. Soldiers dove aside as the ship hurtled toward the half-ruined launch doors. The engines screamed, fire trailing from cracked exhausts. Plasma bolts raked the hull, alarms shrieking, but momentum carried them forward. Then the bay doors exploded. The Zirathi had breached from the outside, tearing open the hangar with a blast. A flood of vacuum howled inward, sucking flames, wreckage, and screaming soldiers into space. The dropship barreled through the chaos, barely under control, and burst into the stars. But they weren't free yet. Two enemy fighters peeled away from the wreckage, sleek and deadly, glowing like emerald knives against the black. They locked on immediately, plasma cannons warming. Marcus yanked the controls, forcing the ship into a roll. "Hold tight!" he shouted. The girl gripped her harness, knuckles white. The fighters opened fire. Bolts seared past, one clipping the wing, sending the dropship into a wild spin. Marcus fought the controls, teeth clenched, and dove straight into the debris field, the shattered remains of Earth and Zirathi warships alike, drifting like a steel graveyard. The fighters followed, relentless. Marcus pushed the ship harder, weaving between torn hulls and broken engines. Chunks of metal scraped their sides, sparks flaring. The dropship groaned under the strain, but still it flew. A bolt lanced past, nearly gutting the cockpit. The girl cried out, covering her face. Marcus cursed under his breath. The fighters were faster, tighter, designed for killing prey like this. But Marcus Hale wasn't prey. He cut the engines suddenly, throwing the ship into dead drift. The fighters overshot, momentum carrying them past. In that heartbeat of opportunity, Marcus reignited the thrusters, spinning the dropship on its axis. His thumb slammed the trigger and the rear cannons blazed. The first fighter disintegrated, erupting into green flame. The second swerved, but too late. Its wings shredded, it spiraled into a ruined cruiser and exploded. Silence fell. The stars were littered with wreckage and fire, but for now, no enemies pursued. Marcus's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face as he gripped the controls like they might vanish if he let go. The girl slowly lowered her hands, staring at him. Her voice was soft, broken, Terran still halting, but filled with awe. You, human. Strong. He almost laughed, a harsh bark of disbelief, but it died in his throat. His hand still shook on the throttle, adrenaline coursing through him. Strong, maybe, or maybe just desperate. Still, he managed a grin, voice rough. Lady, you haven't seen anything yet. The dropship drifted in silence, hidden in the shadow of a jagged asteroid. The only sound inside was the slow hum of cooling engines and Marcus's ragged breathing as he tried to calm his pulse. His arm bled through the crack in his suit, sticky warmth soaking his undershirt. Every bone in his body ached, but they were alive. That counted for something. The girl sat in the co-pilot's seat, still trembling, though her golden eyes never left the console. Her fingers, slender and faintly glowing, moved over the fractured controls with surprising confidence. She touched a broken relay, and for a moment the whole dashboard lit up brighter than it should have. Marcus frowned, watching. You fix ships now? He muttered, half a growl, half disbelief. Her gaze flicked toward him, wary but calm. Not fix. Wake. The word made no sense to him, but the way she said it, like it was sacred, sent a chill down his spine. He leaned back in his chair, groaning as his ribs protested. All right. Start talking. Who the hell are you? And why were the Zarathi chasing you through my ship? The girl hesitated. She seemed to weigh the air, her hands clasping together before finally whispering, My name... Lyra. Her accent twisted the syllables, soft but sharp at the edges. Daughter of House Sarath, Marcus blinked. House what now? Sarath, she repeated, straighter this time. My people. Call me heir, someday. Queen? The silence in the cockpit thickened. For a long moment, Marcus didn't move, didn't breathe. His mind raced, dragging together the implications. He hadn't just pulled some unlucky refugee out of a wreck. He'd carried the heir of a throne. His laugh came out harsh, disbelieving. You're telling me I just smuggled royalty off a burning battlefield in a flying tin can? She didn't laugh. Her eyes were serious, heavy with something far older than her youthful face. Zarathi know. If I die, my people fall. They burn worlds, break thrones, erase bloodlines. That is their way. You saved me. You saved hope. Marcus rubbed a hand over his face, cursing under his breath. This was insane. He was no diplomat. He wasn't even a captain anymore. The Valkyrie was gone, his squad dead. He was just one battered soldier in a half-ruined dropship. And somehow, this girl wanted to hang the weight of empires around his neck. He opened his mouth to retort, but the ship's warning lights flared red. Enemy signal detected. Marcus's heart dropped. He threw himself at the console, scanning the radar. A cluster of pings pulsed in the distance, closing fast. The Zarathi weren't stupid. They'd tracked his escape vector. They'd found him again. Lyra's eyes narrowed, and for the first time he saw fire in them. Not just fear. Resolve. She laid her hand on the console, her voice low but commanding. Then we fight, he stared at her. Lady, this is a dropship, not a warship. We don't fight, we run. No, she said, gaze burning brighter. Run, they follow. Fight, they bleed, the console pulsed under her touch. Panels that had been dead flickered awake, lights brightening, weapon systems humming with energy Marcus hadn't thought the ship even had. He looked from her glowing hand to the readouts. What the hell did you just do? Symbiosis, she answered, her voice softer again, almost reverent. My people, born with bond. We can wake machines, guide them. Together stronger. Marcus swallowed, fingers tightening around the controls. For the first time, he realized she wasn't fragile, wasn't helpless. She carried something inside her, something dangerous and powerful. The red pings multiplied. Fighters, fast and sharp, sliding into formation. The Zarathi were here. Marcus's instincts kicked in. He powered up the thrusters. The first volley came like a storm. Plasma bolts hammered the asteroid field, turning drifting wreckage into clouds of molten fragments. Marcus gripped the controls tight, weaving the dropship between tumbling slabs of steel. Alarms screamed as near misses seared across the hull. The Zarathi fighters didn't attack like humans did. They moved in precise formations, weaving around each other in hypnotic spirals, herding prey into corners before striking. To them, Marcus and Lyra weren't opponents. They were prey, already half dead. Too many, Marcus muttered through clenched teeth. This crate can't outfly a pack that size. Beside him, Lyra didn't flinch. She pressed her palm harder against the console, golden light spilling between her fingers. The dashboard pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Systems that should have been fried hummed with unnatural energy. "Not your ship alone," she said quietly, voice vibrating with strange power. "Now ours." The dropship responded like a living creature. Controls tightened, engines roared with new depth, and the cannons pivoted on their own to lock targets. Marcus blinked in disbelief. He wasn't just piloting anymore. He was sharing the ship with her. The fighters closed in, their jagged silhouettes flashing green across the void. Marcus rolled hard, thrusters screaming, skimming the surface of a broken cruiser. Plasma bolts chased them, carving molten scars into the wreckage. "If you've got more tricks, now's the time," he shouted. Lyra's eyes burned like twin suns. "Guide, I strike," the cannons flared. Streams of precise fire erupted from the dropship, weaving patterns Marcus couldn't have calculated. One fighter exploded instantly, then another. The rest faltered, their formation breaking as their prey suddenly fought back with teeth. Marcus laughed, raw and sharp. "Oh, that's more like it." He threw the ship into a spiral, clipping through a gap barely wider than their wings. Two more enemies followed, only to smash into the wreckage. For the first time, the Zarathi broke rhythm. Their hunting spirals unraveled, replaced by angry swarms. But their numbers didn't matter. Marcus's instincts and Lyra's symbiosis fused into something terrifying. He dove where no sane pilot would. She bent the ship to obey impossible turns. And together they carved through the pack. Explosions lit the void like fireworks. Still, Marcus knew this was just the opening act. Hunters were one thing, but the Zarathi always sent the hammer after the knives. And right on cue, the void darkened. The battlecruiser emerged from the shadows, a mountain of metal bristling with weapons. Its bulk dwarfed their dropship 1,000 times over. Its forward batteries alone could vaporize a city. The ship's comm crackled as the Zarathi broadcast their message, harsh clicks layered with static. "Surrender. Yield the Sarath air. Die swiftly." Marcus spat onto the floor. "Yeah, not happening." Lyra's hand tightened on the console, her glow intensifying. "This ship cannot match their giant guns. But strike at heart. Always the heart." Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew what she meant. If they went for the engines or the reactor core, they might cripple the monster. But they'd have to fly right into its kill zone. Every instinct screamed suicide. But he saw the steadiness in her eyes, the certainty. For her people, she'd already chosen death if necessary. "All right," Marcus said, a grin tugging at his lips despite the fear. "We'll do it the human way, loud, reckless, and ugly." The cruiser's guns opened fire. A wall of green plasma turned the void into hellfire. Marcus dove headfirst, weaving through the storm. Hull plating peeled, alarms shrieked, but the dropship moved like it had been born for this dance. Lyra's power flowed through the circuits, sharpening every response. She guided the weapons, Marcus guided the flight. Together they slashed closer and closer until the warship's vast hull filled the canopy. Bolts missed them by meters, but Marcus only pushed harder. His laughter cracked through the cockpit, half crazed, half defiant. "Come on, you bastards! Try and hit me!" They skimmed the cruiser's surface, weaving through spires of gun turrets, so close Marcus could see the pulse of green light inside each cannon. Lyra's shots ripped open emplacements, silencing one after another. The behemoth tried to swat them like a fly, but Marcus refused to be caught. Humanity didn't bow to monsters. They fought even when it was insane, especially when it was insane. At last, the engine vents loomed ahead, glowing slits at the heart of the warship. The cruiser's fire intensified, desperate now, but it was too late. Marcus aligned the dropship, and Lyra poured everything she had into the weapons. "Now!" she cried. The cannons thundered, missiles streaked. A chain of explosions tore through the cruiser's spine, each one brighter than the last. The warship shuddered, a wounded beast, fire consuming its massive frame. Marcus whooped, punching the throttle. "That's what humanity does, Your Highness. We punch giants in the teeth." Presence bled into the ship itself, turning the clunky dropship into something sharper, faster, hungrier. He glanced at her, a strange grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "All right, Your Highness. Let's see what you and I can do." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained fierce. "Yes, human. Show me." The asteroid shadows broke apart as the dropship roared forward, straight into the teeth of the enemy. Plasma fire lit the void, the first bolts streaking past their hull. Marcus rolled into the barrage, his hands moving with raw instinct, and the ship responded with almost unnatural grace. In the corner of his vision, Lyra's golden eyes glowed like suns, her energy feeding into every circuit, every weapon. For the first time since the battle began, Marcus felt the tide might actually turn. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting with her, and that changed everything. The cruiser's death throes lit the void behind them. The dropship roared free, battered but alive. Marcus glanced at Lyra. Her glow had dimmed, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but her eyes still burned with pride. "You fight like my people," she said softly. "But fiercer, wilder." Marcus grinned, blood on his teeth. "Yeah, that's humanity for you. And for the first time in the war, the Zirathi had learned it too." The cruiser didn't just die quietly. When Marcus and Lyra's strike ripped through its engine vents, the warship detonated like a sun being born. Whole decks ruptured outward, hurling fire and twisted steel into the void. The blast wave hit their dropship seconds later, slamming it end over end. Marcus wrestled the controls, but the stick bucked in his hands, the ship spinning wildly through the storm of debris. The hull screamed as chunks of molten metal tore gouges across its surface. "Stabilizers gone!" he shouted. Lyra gripped the console, golden light pouring from her hands as she forced dead systems awake. Panels flickered, engines coughed back to life, and the spin slowed. But they weren't clear yet. A shard the size of a house punched through their starboard wing, tearing it apart in a spray of sparks. Warning lights erupted across the dashboard. The dropship groaned, one engine sputtering, the whole frame trembling on the edge of disintegration. Marcus swore and yanked the throttle. "Come on, you stubborn bastard, hold together." The ship lurched, leveling just enough to thread a path through the wreckage. Behind them, the cruiser's remains collapsed inward, its core flaring in a final burst that sent shock waves through space. When they finally broke free of the explosion's halo, Marcus slumped against the seat, every muscle aching. His helmet HUD blinked red across every system. Fuel nearly gone, oxygen low, weapons fried. The cockpit stank of ozone and burned circuitry. Sparks dripped from overhead like rain. He turned to Lyra. Her glow had faded almost completely, her body trembling with exhaustion. Sweat ran down her silver skin, and for the first time, he noticed just how young she looked. Barely past the cusp of adulthood, and already carrying the burden of a crown. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. She gave a faint nod, though her lips were pale. "I endure." Marcus barked a laugh that sounded more like a cough. Hell of an answer. Before he could say more, the radar blared. He froze, eyes snapping to the screen. More Zirathi ships were inbound. Not a cruiser this time, multiple destroyers and fighter wings sweeping the sector, converging on their position like sharks scenting blood. The bastards weren't letting them go. Marcus's gut clenched. The dropship couldn't take another fight. One more hit and they'd disintegrate. Lyra saw it too. Her expression hardened, but her voice was calm. "Go, I will leave. They want me, not you. If I leave, you live. Marcus turned on her, fury sparking in his chest. The hell I will. I didn't drag you out of that fire just to hand you back to the bastards. Her eyes shone, full of quiet desperation. You cannot win. Human, you have done enough. If you stay, you die. Lady, Marcus said, forcing a grin through the sweat and blood streaking his face. I don't quit. Not in a fight, not on a battlefield, not ever. She blinked, stunned by the ferocity in his voice. I don't die for people, he added, his hand steady on the controls. I fight with them. The words hung heavy in the cockpit. Lyra's throat tightened. She lowered her gaze, then placed her hand on the console once more. Weak as she was, her glow returned, fainter, but still there. Then, we die together or live together, Marcus smirked. That's the spirit. The destroyers closed in, their formation tightening. Plasma fire lit the void again. Marcus hurled the dying dropship into another insane dive, skimming through the wreckage of their earlier battle. Every shot rattled the hull, but he didn't flinch. Lyra pushed what little strength she had left into the weapons. The cannons sputtered, then fired, taking out 2 fighters in a blaze. Marcus cut the engines, flipping the ship end over end, and blasted another on the way down. But the dropship couldn't keep up. Systems failed faster than they could fight. A direct hit tore through the rear compartment, flames licking at the cabin. The cockpit filled with smoke, alarms wailing. Marcus coughed hard, eyes watering. He glanced at Lyra. She was swaying in her seat, barely conscious, her glow flickering like a dying star. For a moment he thought it was over, then instinct took over. He cut across the destroyer formation, skimming their guns so close they hesitated to fire for fear of hitting each other. He threaded the ship into a narrow debris canyon, forcing the pursuers to break apart. It wasn't victory, but it was survival. Barely. The dropship burst out of the debris field, trailing smoke and fire, engines howling in protest. Only one destroyer still pursued, its weapons charging for the kill shot. Marcus bared his teeth. Not today. He pulled every ounce of thrust the ship had left and dove straight for the destroyer's bridge. At the last second, he fired their last missile, blowing open the viewport. The destroyer reeled, blinded, and Marcus yanked the controls, skimming past its surface with meters to spare. The enemy broke off, unable to follow. The dropship drifted into the silence beyond. Systems failing, oxygen bleeding, but alive. Marcus leaned back, breath ragged, staring at the stars. Lyra's hand slipped into his, her grip weak but steady. You are madness, she whispered. But beautiful madness, Marcus chuckled, coughing. That's humanity for you. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if they'd see another sunrise. But if this was the last stand, then damn it, it was one worthy of remembering. The dropship was little more than a drifting coffin. Hull plates hung loose, scorched wires hissed, and half the cockpit had melted from the firestorm. The only sound was the steady rasp of oxygen running out. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the stars that blurred slowly past. Every breath burned. His body screamed with exhaustion, but his grip on the controls didn't falter. Somewhere inside him, stubbornness outlasted logic. He wasn't going to let go until the last possible second. Lyra stirred beside him. Her silver skin was dulled, her glow reduced to faint pulses. Yet her gaze was steady when she turned to him. You gave everything, she whispered. Why? I was nothing to you. Marcus's cracked lips tugged into a grin. Guess I don't like bullies. Doesn't matter what planet they're from. Her throat tightened. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hiss of leaking air. Then, out of the void, beams of light cut through the darkness. Sleek ships shimmered into view, hulls forged in elegant curves, banners trailing with the royal crest of her people. A rescue fleet, Lyra's breath caught. She recognized the flagship at once, the Dawn Spire, the most sacred vessel of her line. Her people had found her. The comm crackled, alien voices flooding the channel. Highborn! By the stars, you live! Marcus let out a ragged laugh. Relief washed through him so hard his arms finally went slack on the controls. He slumped back, every ounce of adrenaline gone. The royal ships encircled the dropship, shielding it from further attack. Small craft locked onto their hull with magnetic clamps, pulling them into safety. When the cockpit finally hissed open, fresh air rushed in. Figures in ornate armor rushed forward, bowing low before Lyra. "Your Majesty," one of them said, voice trembling. "Your throne awaits," Marcus froze. "Majesty, throne?" His gaze snapped to her. She looked back, guilt and pride warring in her eyes. "You're the Queen?" he asked, voice hoarse. She swallowed. I am. My people thought me dead when the Zarathi came. You saved me?" Without knowing who I was. Marcus blinked, then barked a tired laugh. "Well, that explains the glow." She stepped toward him, but the soldiers tried to push him aside. Their weapons gleamed as they moved to separate the human from their queen. Lyra's voice cracked like thunder. "Stand down!" The guards froze. She turned back to Marcus, her tone soft now. "They will not understand what you did, not fully. But I will. Always," he gave a crooked smile. "Don't mention it." Just another day at the office, but his body betrayed him. The blood loss, the broken ribs, the exhaustion. His knees buckled. She caught him before he hit the deck, her hands glowing faintly as she tried to knit torn flesh together. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't get to leave me now." He forced his eyes open, meeting her tear-bright gaze. "Hey, you'll be fine. You've got a kingdom to run, people to lead." He coughed, smearing blood on his chin. "Just don't forget the stubborn idiot who dragged you out of a war zone." Her glow surged, not from power, but from fury and grief. She leaned close, pressing her forehead against his. "I swear it, Marcus Holt, I will never forget. Not in one lifetime, not in 10. I will carve your name into the stars." The medics dragged him onto a stretcher, their scanners already working, tubes hissing as they pumped fresh air into his lungs. He drifted in and out of consciousness, catching glimpses of her face framed by the glow of her people's ship. As the stretcher carried him deeper into the vessel, she stood tall, the crown of light forming above her brow once more. The crew bowed, their voices thundering in reverence. "Long live the Queen!" But Lyra's eyes never left Marcus. He had not only saved her life, he had saved her throne, her people, her future. Humanity's fire had carved itself into the destiny of another world, and as the stars wheeled outside the viewport, Lyra made her silent vow. This was not the end. The bond forged in fire would outlast empires. Marcus Holt, the human soldier who had refused to surrender, would forever be remembered, not as an outsider, but as the first protector of the Queen of the Dawnspire.